What's going on, everybody? Another episode of the Leaders of Leaders podcast. And I have got an incredible guest for you today. Dominique Brightmon, DTM, is a certified trainer with the Maxwell Leadership Team, best-selling author. We'll get into that real quick. And a host of the Going North podcast, a podcast committed to featuring authors from around the world to promote the power of the written word and inspire listeners to publish books of their own. His mantra is advance others to advance yourself. So let's jump right in. First of all, thank you so much for hopping on the show, Dom.
Thanks so much, man. Aaron, man. I appreciate it, man. Honored to be here with you. That means something's working since I got the invite.
Right. So let's just jump right in. Advancing others, and obviously clear overtones of scripture, clear overtones of Jesus Christ. So how has following the Lord helped you in your journey to be able to write a book at 23 and be a best-selling author and be on the Maxwell Leadership Team? I mean, obviously we just described some of that list. How has following the Lord helped you in this path to serving others or advancing others to advance yourself?
Hey, solid question, man. It's a question I rarely get a chance to even answer because it's true. The overtones are so true, like advancing others to advance yourself, like Jesus Christ. He's the main example of that. Like, if you want an example of A1 servant leadership, Christ is your number one example right there, with sacrificing his life for those who choose to follow him and give their life to him. And my journey's been one heck of a bit of a winding road a little bit, because I was raised in the church, and around when I turned 13 years old, where I can make better decisions for myself after officially joining the church, I actually decided to do the prayer of salvation for myself. That was around April 4th, 2004, when I was 13.
But
And
who's
ever
counting?
since then, like it's kind of a funny thing. Depending on where you go, it's like they're like, "Hey, if you're saved, you know the exact date when it happened." It's like, all right, well, that's when it happened, and I haven't forgot it yet. So I guess it's true.
Right.
And yeah, man, it's been one heck of a journey. Even went to a Christian school and learned how to actually memorize scripture a lot better and have it applied to my own life. And one of the major things that actually helped me in with everything that's going on, I believe and it's even one of my favorite verses of all time, the 2 Timothy 1:7, for God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. And one of the books that fell into my path, in addition to the Bible, was The Greatest Salesman in the World, especially at the end of the book, where he talks about those 10 ancient scrolls for success. And one of those scrolls is, I will greet this day with love in my heart. And as a Christian, we're basically required to love one another, even with that wonderful unconditional love. Like, there's really no condition for it, because, hey, Christ loved us, so let's share that love with other people. And that love I share with others is inspiring others to be the best versions of themselves possible. And that came out in a form of being an author who likes to encourage and inspire other aspiring authors and authors of life to really let their light shine among others through their work that God has allowed them to do. So yeah, that's kind of a short semi long, let's call that a medium answer to your question, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, we can make the long story long if you want. No. uh, so you obviously you wrote a book, and you wrote a book at the youthful age of 23. Some might say your brain wasn't fully formed. I would say my brain wasn't fully formed at 23, and yet you wrote and published a book. Why? Why did you do that?
Oh yeah. Funny enough, the other part of the 2 Timothy 1:7 comes into play with that one, because I actually wrote that book on a dare, funny enough. Like, because the thing was, back then I came across this wonderful book called The Magic of Getting What You Want by David Schwartz. And in that book, he mentioned an activity to really take yourself to the next level is writing your own obituary. And in that obituary, I wrote down that I was going to be a published author, a best-selling author, multiple books. And a few months later, an opportunity showed itself to me, revealed itself to me when I was networking with folks at a conference and when I was handing out these reading lists to people as opposed to business cards, because, hey, business cards, they end up in the trash or forgotten. So I didn't want to be forgotten like that by the fellow humans. So, hey, let's make a reading list and then we can see how we mesh together, because usually those in business usually like to read for the most part. And one lady I handed the list to, she looked at the list, looked right back at me, looked at the list, looked right back at me, and asked me, "Hey, so where's your name on this list?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's at the bottom, the Don Brand with the 443 number." Like, "No, I'm talking about your name on this list as an author." I'm like, "I'm 23. What the heck I'm going to write about?" And she's like, like, how about, dude, how about a year for the date? How about you become an author, published author? Just see your name in lights, Don Brightmon, author. I'm like, I think I'm good. Okay, how about we both a year from today become published authors? And I'm like, that sounds even better. It's like we both can suffer. All right, let's bear the cross together. And I'm like, nah, I think I'm good. And that fear kicked in, but a couple days later, after I told a friend of mine that conversation, when I didn't shake on the deal with the dare, my buddy had to call me out on it, and it's like the friend who's basically closer than a brother in a way that helped me out. I was like, "Hey, so Dom, when are you going to write a book?" Because he asked me during a Q&A session of a speech project I had to do, and the speech had nothing to do with the writing books at all, but that was the first question he asked. And I'm like, wow, well, I don't want to look like a coward on stage. I guess I got to say something. How about a year from today? A year from today, I'm going to write a book. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. A year from today. And that was November. Yeah, that was November 3rd, I believe, 2015. And a year later, I was able to, even though I didn't agree to the ladies' dare at first, in my mind, I still kept that as a dare to myself. And the book was published a year later because it was like, hey, sometimes you need other folks to really get you out of your comfort zone and to really step into that growth zone. And you're going to have fear along the way. And like, hey, Christ, he had his apprehensions about going to the cross and him asking for, like, hey, let this cup pass from me, Father. Come on, help out your son here. It's like, no, you got to go. And it's like, sometimes, like, hey, sometimes you just need to get into that wilderness and then come out on the other side with new strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And so did I hear that correctly? You said April 4th, 2014, you were saved?
2004.
Oh, 2004. Oh, I was like, dang, that was like 1 year after the other, 2014, 2015, 2016. He's just racking it up. Uh, yeah. So, okay. 2004, that makes more sense. But I mean, that would have been pretty epic as well. Okay. So, what's the book about?
Sure thing. So, the first book, Going North Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, is a synthesized self help package for the distracted mind because it's under 100 pages. And it's stuff that I've actually done in my life because people are tired of metaphorical pleather jackets. They want authenticity. They want the genuine article. They want the genuine leather. And if you want to advance in your career, it's the book to pick up because the tips in that book helped me to advance in my career to full time librarianship. If you want to become a better thinker, ask yourself better questions, that's definitely the book to pick up. If you want to gain even more questions to really gain even a deeper focus, and it don't even have to be just your spiritual life, just your whole life altogether, it's definitely the book to pick up because the questions that I put in that book are the ones that I've asked of myself and I've gotten replies and I've actually taken advice and I've advanced as a result because sometimes we may not be where we want to be in life because we're asking the wrong questions. Sometimes you may have to go into prayer and ask God for help in certain areas. Although, if you pray for patience, you're going to get that wish.
Yeah. I'm right. I mean, I love that. And it's funny. That's actually been, and not patience, but the conviction of mine is to stop holding back on prayers that I've been convicted by the Holy Spirit to pray, because I'm afraid that I'm going to get opportunities to have to utilize the requests that I'm asking, or the character traits and personality adjustments that I'm asking for. That's pretty good. And so you talk about, I'm guessing you have the Going North podcast. So I'm guessing in the Going North podcast, you're talking about a lot of similar things. And are you interviewing guests? Are you doing solo recordings, or is it a bit of both? And is it around the same kind of topics, or is it just more generally succeeding in life?
Oh, yeah. It's actually a little bit of both. It's probably 99% just me doing guest interviews with folks, and the other 1% where it's just me doing solo episodes. I call those the selfie casts. It's like selfie with the podcast. It's like, oh yeah, it's about interviewing authors, but hey, I'm one too. And I usually do those every now and then because sometimes new folks come around and really just sharing like quick life lessons, even some stuff that I've like done and given talks on stage and just sharing it with folks who may not get the opportunity to hear it. And plus, it's a chance for me to practice as well. And the podcast really features authors from so many different backgrounds. And of course, not all of them are Christian, even though I'm a Christian myself, because we can learn anything from anybody and it can even strengthen our faith as a result. Like, heck, even
Absolutely.
one time when I actually had a conversation. Oh, that's kind of funny. Actually, had a conversation. Anyways, I had a conversation with one guest in particular where she actually used to actually be a psychic at one time, and she actually gave her life to Christ because she actually had a bunch of moments where she was brought to the fact of, hey, this ain't something you want to play with because it's dark magic. And she actually had a weird experience where she looked in the mirror and she saw horns, and it was an opportunity to sell her soul to the devil, in her words. And she was like, oh crap. She just basically threw all of her tarot cards out the house and whatnot afterwards, and really just gave her life to the Lord because she just saw that apparition in the mirror that that past life that she had, where sometimes if you dip too far into the darkness, like, there may not be a chance for you to come out to the light. And she saw her opportunity to get out of that. So really just interviewing different people, learning from their experiences, and just getting really a chance for them to get their stories out there and to get their feet wet being interviewed. Because one thing that being a Christian will do is give you confidence, especially a new lease on life. And helping folks to get confidence as well is definitely a bonus. So yeah, it's mostly about interviewing other folks, giving them a platform to shine and a little bit selfish to learn from them, and others to learn from them as well of what to do, what not to do, and hey, get better as opposed to getting butter.
Getting butter. I love butter though. uh, uh, so speaking of getting better, how long have you been doing the Going North podcast then? For
Yeah, it's 5.5 years, soon to be 6 at this point. I mean, I think by the time this comes out, I'm probably 6 months away from the 6th anniversary, which is crazy to me because I didn't think I'd be still doing it for 6 years.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. So this is an opportunity for me to learn from you, and I know that if any listener right now goes to dombrightmon.com, they can download the 21 lessons learned from podcasting. But I would love to at least get one or three of those, if I could be selfish and get three, but at least get one. What are some of the principles? What are some of the values? What are some of the things that you've pulled? Now, obviously, you just shared a pretty incredible story about somebody's testimony. But what are some of the things that you've learned, that you've been able to apply, that you've been able to help other people advance themselves, and then also advance yourself by podcasting?
Sure thing. First one is it's always been a favorite of mine because I'm sure folks are familiar with gratitude journals. And sometimes you mention gratitude journals to some people and they're like, "Oh man, I'm grateful, but man, these gratitude journals, man, I'm kind of sick of them." Well, here's a spin for you. How about calling them a victory log instead and logging your victories? Like, hey, you woke up this morning, that's a victory because a lot of people didn't get that chance, especially in these last 3+ years and counting. Like being able to make it to work on time if you're known as the person being late. Like that's a freaking victory right there. Being able to get into your Bible and actually have a nice, wonderful session of actually reading a chapter or three, like that's a victory. Being able to guest on Aaron's podcast, like that's a victory. Like logging on, just logging all your wins, no matter how big or small. And then 3 months later, going back and looking back over all your wins and having that wonderful journal of proof of, hey, these are my past wins here. And this shows that I'm a winner because sometimes when you live through life, there's going to be times where you're going to forget your past victories. But if you write things down, jot things down, and you have that opportunity to look back on, you may realize, wow, like the Lord put me in this world to be a winner, and I'm in a winner's world because this journal here, this victory log, is a journal of proof, and it's just that, like that one tip alone is definitely one of my favorites to share, and what I've gained from interviewing, I believe Sam Leibowitz, who wrote this book called Everyday Awakening. Like that one tip alone, like that really was a game changer. Second tip, definitely want to mention for folks is that since this podcast is basically about leadership and being a leader of leaders, one thing folks want to keep in mind is that when folks start coming to you for advice and help, that's a sign that you're on the right track, especially in business. Because one thing I noticed with my podcast around after 32 episodes, I started getting these pitches from media companies. And I'm like, dude, I'm a random black guy from Baltimore on the internet. How the heck you find me for? And it was all because of that consistency with the show because every Thursday I said an episode would go up, and every Thursday, even if it was 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it still went up online. It was Thursday somewhere still, and that consistency led to getting attention and eventually folks coming to me for advice, and I was just honored because I'm like, dude, I'm still a novice at this. I'm still learning. Even today, I'm still learning at this. There's still a lot for me to learn because I'm sure the Lord's going to bless me with a lot of life on this earth, and that means there's going to be some lot of days of learning ahead too. So I'm still learning. So having that spirit of humility and realizing that that day comes when someone comes to you for advice, that's a sign that you're on the right track. And a third tip that I would love to share with folks that I gained from the podcast is to make sure that you just have fun. Like have have to do something that you enjoy. Sometimes you can even call it your pocket of play, where you give yourself 15 minutes to do something that you truly enjoy, where it can just detox from the day, like getting your thinking chair, reading a great novel. Heck, even if it's a nonfiction book, if you prefer nonfiction like myself. Heck, even for video games. Heck, even one guest in particular, he was a guy in his 40s and he wasn't too big at games at one point, but he started playing video games. And when he got online, he set this hard deadline of 30 minutes. And even though he was in the middle of a game where he was winning, the kid was disappointed online they was playing with because he told him like, "Hey, my time's up. I gotta go." He was like, "Hey, where are you going?" I mean, it's like he set that hard deadline for himself, but he at least got that moment of play in his day. So, just a quick recap: have a moment of play in your day, have a victory log, and of course, realize that the day when people come to you for advice, you're on the right track.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, if you're listening, you could go to dombrightmon.com to get those 21 lessons learned from his podcasting. And so is it mainly authors that are on your podcast, or because obviously here we have leaders. And so obviously if you have a podcast, if you have written a book, if you are a parent, like there's all sorts of spheres of influence that require some level of leadership, which obviously you're well aware of being on the Maxwell leadership team. Um, but is it all authors that are on your podcast, or do you have all sorts of different walks of life?
Yes, all authors from different walks of life, because one misconception out there that I think is slowly coming to reality for folks is that if just because you're an author, that doesn't mean you're rich. Like the thing is, you're not gonna make your money from writing a book. Like you write one book and you become a millionaire. Like that's not happening unless you found a publishing house that sees that you're worth really giving that much money to. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
the only way that's going to happen. And by the time they give you that amount of money for a contract for a publishing deal, you most likely have a following online that's a great amount and you have a proven track record. So the thing is, even though it's all authors, they have different skill sets and different experiences. Like even one guy I had on my show, he was a veteran in the U.S. Army, but he also was a pastor as well. He's actually a pastor, and he actually was with Joel Osteen's church at one point, and he learned from him, and he started his own church afterwards. And he is a businessman helping other folks to become millionaires. Heck, he even had a short campaign where he was running for president on the independent ticket. And of course, he didn't win, of course, but hey, it was something he wanted to do. He got the experience and he just did it because it was something he wanted to do as a kid. Is basically be president, and running for it was definitely one step in that direction, all the way to a wonderful mother who wrote a book called Raising Healthy Humans, with her being a mother who does yoga for health and fitness and being a mom of three kids, just helping other parents with tips to become better parents. And it's like, hey, parents, you got to learn the job as you go. You can read all the books and magazines you want, but they're not going to be much when it's go time, when it's a 24/7 duty. So it's really, yes, it's all authors, but it's so many folks from different walks of life. Even some folks who may have went through category 5 divorces, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Yeah. What was the name of this category 5 divorce? No.
I was actually Lori Lynn Bridges. I think her episode was in the 290s back in 2020.
Nice.
She was one of the co-authors in the book called Crappy to Happy: Secret Stories of Transformational Joy. And the guy she was married to was a legit narcissist, because after their divorce, the dude actually came by to Lori Lynn's mother's house, even though she wasn't the in-law anymore, and basically filed a lawsuit against her because he was trying to get her to fight him and whatnot, and it just failed horribly. So yeah, dude,
Oh,
dude was just causing all sorts
dang.
of crazy nonsense. It was insane.
That is insane. So
Yeah.
have you written another book since the first book at 23, or do you have plans on writing another book?
Yes, got one other solo project, Stay the Course, the Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. That's the follow up to Going North. And then I offered 2 chapters in 2 other books: The Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. That I offered contributed a chapter to that with 28 other authors. And then another book that came out last fall, The Fourfold Formula for All Things Wellness. And that book basically ties into physical health, spiritual health, as well as habits, and also your mental health as well. So somebody contributed a story that fit in one of those 4 areas. So I used to joke and say I have 2.5 books, but now I guess I got 3 since I contributed 2 chapters in. Another book is in the works that'll be out hopefully before quarter 1 is over. So hopefully before April 2023, you'll get to see a new book from me.
Nice. And so obviously we can purchase these on dombrightmon.com, I'm guessing, right?
Yes, sir.
And are they anywhere else? Because it sounds to me like you're self-publishing them. Is this next book a self-published book as well?
Yes, sir, indeed. Because that's the thing. Like, self publishing is really the way to go nowadays, because you get more royalties, you get more control. Because the thing is, especially now, since Barnes and Noble realizes they're losing market share now, they're actually a lot more open to indie authors that are independently published. Because the thing is, a lot of indie authors are looking for a chance to get in bookstores. Well, hey, now's your opportunity, as opposed to 10, 20 years ago where they thought all indie authors are basically garbage. It's like, nope, nope. You can get a book that's comparable, sometimes maybe even better than the big wigs who are publishing, because now you have so many tools available to get your stories, your messages out there in comparable, if sometimes even better form than those who have the big wigs and the big publishing houses, the big four as they call them, and you have the opportunity to not only make more income for yourself, but also have more control. Because at the end of the day, as I kind of touched a little bit on it earlier, it's like, hey, publishing companies are looking for folks that can sell books, that can move some of that wonderful books, that muscle for you. So if you're already moving the muscle on yourself, there's really no point of having a big four publisher.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's what's interesting is yeah, because they're big publishers, right? They have backing, right? Capital and whatnot, and they already have a name out there, and so they can push a certain amount. But then the more interesting part is then they're also looking for authors that can push as well, because they know that just kind of creates an avalanche, so to speak, or um, goes from category 3 to category 5, if we want to stay with that. Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. So do you give advice for anybody who's trying to write a book or do writing? Obviously they could listen to these authors and probably learn and glean from that. But do you particularly give advice to anybody or help anybody write their own book?
Of course, definitely. And I'm proud to say, after publishing my first book, six other authors published theirs after seeing a random millennial actually publish his book and actually promote himself. So, yeah, it's one of my biggest honors and gifts on the planet. It's like, oh, wow, you're like twice my age. It actually inspired you, man. This is awesome. Praise the Lord.
No, I mean, yeah, praise the Lord, because it is inspiring, absolutely. And I mean, it would only be the egotistical and prideful person that would be like, somehow try to make an excuse, like, as to why they shouldn't be inspired by somebody who is younger than them. And so then you talk about, speaking of millennial, right? So you talk about 3 skills that millennials should develop and eventually master. And so obviously the listeners on this, I have some younger listeners, I have some older listeners. But the younger listeners, shoot, probably even the older listeners could learn from maybe these 3 skills that millennials should develop and eventually master. What are those 3 skills? I am personally curious. So
I'm so glad you asked this question because I kind of cheat with it. Because the first skill is communication, and communication is a whole tree of other many skills under the giant skill tree. Because with communication, it has to be written, it has to be verbal. So knowing how to write professional emails to fellow folks in your industry, because you can't just use emojis all the time when you're communicating with
wait,
folks. You
what?
can't just use you just can't use text speak all the time. Like it's not always going to fly. Public speaking, that's a skill that'll take you over the edge. Being able to read body language, that'll take you definitely over the edge as well. Like with communication, heck, even being able to communicate with your body when you're presenting and being able to read other people's body language. Like there's just so many things under communication. So that's the first one. Second one would be financial literacy because that's something they don't teach in schools. I think Florida, though, they're actually making strides in that area, at least with financial literacy. They did some recent stuff I'm not a fan of, but at least the financial literacy part, that part I agree with. Like having a class for high schools to take to help them to at least have a better setup and a better footing if they go to college or not will definitely put them over the edge because so many times you go to, especially those who move out of town and have a chance to get a credit card and do this all the other stuff and jack themselves up like that mess can suck, especially with all the financial debt and student loan money that could really hurt you down the road if you don't work or if you're not on a full ride scholarship. And
Absolutely.
definitely the third one will be to learn how to cultivate relationships, especially with folks who definitely have high levels of influence. Because one thing that I've noticed is that even though I got an IIT degree, that degree didn't get me on this show. It actually came from taking action, discovering personal development, and getting around people that challenge me to write books, challenge me to actually do what I'm actually preaching and speaking about. Like being around those who challenge me to do more, and then them inviting me and connecting me with other folks who are doing great things. So if you're able to really network effectively and cultivate those relationships, that'll take you to the next level. And the first two can even really help the third one even better as well. So that way you get to do more stuff with those people. So yeah, those are three skills, my man.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so speaking of cultivating relationship, obviously you're alluding to cultivating relationships with like real people in real time. However, I have found that some people have asked, "Oh, who are some of your more influential uh, people in your life?" And some of these people are dead, right? Some of these people and they're not dead because they died recently or something like that. They died a long time ago, but I'm reading words that they wrote that have stood the test of time. And obviously, Jesus Christ is not dead, but many of the disciples, right? Many of the epistles, many of the letters. Um, I mean, these men have gone to be with the Lord, and and their truths ring true. I mean, obviously inspired by the Holy Spirit, canonized in our Bibles, in our scriptures that we understand and know as Christians. But then also, there's other prolific writers through the history of time that have written words that, man, have impact even now. And so that brings me to the fact that you're a full-time, you said full-time librarian, and I want to unpack that a little bit. Is that a so that is your current position? You're a full-time librarian, so you spend time with all of these dead and alive spheres of influence around you. What is that like? How did that come to be? What's the pursuit there? How has that helped shape you into who you are now and today?
Solid question indeed. That actually started back around a good almost 16 years ago, back when I was about to start my 11th grade year, and my mom wanted me to find a job so that way I can get an edge over my buddies who haven't found jobs yet while they're in school. And she prayed about it, and the Lord directed her to the local library in my neighborhood. It was walking distance, and I was a summer youth intern there. And it was a paid internship to boot. So it was like, hey, double
Nice.
win, work experience, and I get to get paid for it. Hooray, some lunch money. You love to see it. And I didn't do anything stupid for my 3 months, and they invited me to come back when I officially turned 16 that September. And I've really been there ever since, kept the job for the remainder of my high school tenure, then through college, got my IT degree. Then they promoted me full time, and it just really been one heck of an opportunity. And one thing I like to inform people about with the libraries, especially public ones, is that they're not really just the old dusty buildings with the old mean ladies behind the desk telling you to shush. It's actually a lot different nowadays. Like the card catalog, that's gone. That's on the computer. Like the books, we still got books for you, but we got computers and a lot more other things. And during the pandemic, one of the major pivots that we made and that we actually had the groundwork laid for was that we have at that time about a good 300 Chromebooks for folks to check out and use to get their computer work done, as well as 50 different Wi-Fi hotspots for folks to connect to the internet from if they couldn't get internet at home. And for those who weren't able to get those hotspots before the darn pandemic started, the libraries themselves, the Wi-Fi expanded to cover at least the whole entire parking lot, so that way, if folks felt like getting outside, they needed internet, they couldn't be in the building, but they could still use the building for Wi Fi. And it was a drop off point for free lunches for those kids who used to only get meals during school time. And since school wasn't happening, they had to get food somehow. And we were able to distribute free meals for kids in the neighborhood at the local library. So it's not all about the It's not all about the books. It's really about the books and the people. We got books covered from diaper to diaper, from Huggies to the pens. We got you covered.
I love it. And so, is there, like you said, nonfiction seems to be, but nonfiction is sort of like a pretty wide ranging. There's a lot of genres inside of nonfiction. Is there a particular genre that tickles your fancy, so to speak, or that you sort of find yourself diving into more of, or do you sort of pepper your choices throughout the entirety of the library, and then but then maybe have a mainstay in a certain genre?
Oh yeah, definitely some peppering. Because when I first fell in love with reading again back in 2013, late 2012, like the self help area and the 650s with the leadership books from John Maxwell, like those are my jam. They still are to this day, but also biographies, especially if they're on audio and they're read by the author. Like those are definitely my favorites. Like even one there's like so many biographies, but I think like even Will Smith's biography, just hearing that and the production, like the production job they did on that was so well done.
Mm.
Very inspirational biography, and heck, even like sales, negotiation, of course, leadership as well. Occasional, of course, time management, productivity that falls into place. Occasionally, I might pick up a novel, like The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Like now that's probably one of those rare exceptions. Heck, even one author I recommend folks to pick up, Michelle Chenoweth. Her slant is edgy, modern day told Bible stories. And her book, The Faithful One, which was her first book, is modern a modernized version of the story of Job. And like that book almost brought me to freaking tears because it was like, wow, it's freaking real here. Because she really took all the elements from Job and applied them to different characters in the different modern day settings. So like that's really where I'm at in terms of the reading, like audiobooks. Like, don't if there's some purists out there who say, "Hey, you're listening to the book on audio,
They
that's
don't have
not
kids.
reading."
or
Exactly.
or they
That's
ignore
really
their
what it is.
kids.
Exactly. It's like, nah, audiobooks count.
Exactly right.
Audiobooks count.
Exactly right. Or they don't have a driving job where they're on the road all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, try
Exactly.
like yeah, who's we already get upset at people texting and driving, let alone having a big novel out there in front of their face while they're driving. Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what. So I because I have kids and I found it really hard to read paperback books, and I love actually. I would love to be a purist. It just my my current situation in life doesn't allow me to be the purist and be able to shout that at you when you said audiobooks. But I listened to Kevin Hart's audiobook, and
Ah,
it was dude it because if you read the book, it's funny because it's a lot of like just comedic timing and the way in which he sets things up or whatever, just how he tells a story in writing. But then to
right.
hear him, he's riffing, right? That stuff that's not
Hmm.
even in the book. And I was
Yep.
rolling the entirety of that audiobook. It was great. And yeah, it's all about the narrator with the audiobook. It rises and falls on the narrator. So sometimes it's a good book, bad narrator. Yeah, what do you do? But I'm sure you can obviously you can give some advice on that because did I hear a Dewey Decimal pop up? Did I hear is it the Dewey Decimal System? What's it called nowadays? Where you said 650s, and I was like, oh man, that just brought me all the way back to elementary school, like learning the like card catalog thing and all this stuff. You just spouted that off like it was like you're a librarian. Is that what I just heard? What's it called? What's that numerical code called?
Hey, you're correct, and it's still the same Dewey Decimal System. Like with the system I work for, we only use it just to file our nonfiction books. Everything else, they're
Gotcha.
just filed under the sections. Like if it's a fiction book, it's called fiction ADR if they're in the A's. If it's a DVD, well, DVD, I don't know,
Mhm.
Black Adam, like DVD BLA or whatever, DVD movie or whatever. But yeah, we still use Dewey, but just with the nonfiction books. Don't use it for
Gotcha.
everything. You
Gotcha.
don't have to get scared, be like, oh God, I don't know the numbers.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why you just get like, excuse me, sir, excuse me, ma'am, I need some help with this. I don't know what I'm doing here. This is the first time I've been in the library in 20 years. Um,
Yep.
yeah, personally, I love libraries. I did very much dislike dentist office, and it has nothing to do with dentists, has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with what's going on to me in that
Yeah.
place. But man, libraries, it's like I've just had this forever fondness, and it's probably because I've had a forever fondness with books, which that would totally make sense. So, how do you experience? Obviously, you said at the very beginning, and so this maybe is a big callback, um, and kind of round this out a little bit. But so, how do you find serving the Lord, serving others, which I think there's obvious observation that one could probably imagine, but I'm guessing that there's other moments, still small voices, or just moments of even stillness or whatever in your experience in the library where you're experiencing the Lord, whether it's through service, through advancing others, which to me, I don't know, you probably understood this. Maybe that's why you named it, but there's like this through line. And I named the episode Advancing Others. And I'm so glad that I did, because I feel like this is just exuding out of every area and aspect of who you are, Dom, where you're just, that is in the librarian role, in your podcasting, in your authorship, in your, writing some of these other chapters as an author for some of these other books that have a collaboration of authors, um, in the Maxwell Leadership Team, right? All of this stuff, it's all towards this advancing others. So, how have you seen the Lord interact in your life as you've pursued, specifically in the librarian role? Because we kind of talked about it with authorship, we kind of talked about it with the podcast and going north, and we can come back to those, but specifically in this full-time work in a public library, how have you experienced the Lord? How has the Lord shown you things or shown himself in that setting?
Yeah, one of the major things that a gift for the Lord Himself is definitely the gift of a calm mind and a calm spirit. Because sometimes it hasn't happened as much in recent history, knock on wood, but sometimes it would be 5 o'clock. Of course, the 5 o'clock crowd coming rushing in after a bad day at work, and they just want to unload on the first person they see. They
Mm,
give you grief, and sometimes it's like, all right, yeah, kind of like the whole prayer for patience thing where it's like, all right, listening ear time. It's like, all right, let them vent, get their frustrations out. And then it's like, all right, they get to leave with a smile. It's like, all right, another victory for the victory log. All the way to folks who are rushing in. Funny enough, it was last week even. A customer came in trying to print out a shipping label to return some kind of item so she can get her money back. At first, she was like, "Man, could you do this work for me?" I'm like, "No, it's called empowerment. We're here to help, but not to do your stuff for you. It's like doing homework. Like we don't do your homework. We're here to empower you." And
mm,
after it was all said and done, she was happy that she was able to get her label printed out. She was able to log into her email and print out the label, and she was so happy. She was like, "Hey, bless you, mister." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, bless you too." And you sometimes meet those Christians along the way, especially in the community that I'm a part of, where you got a nice little mix of folks who have different faith backgrounds, but there's still a Christian slant to just about the majority. It may not be like 80% as it was, I'd say 15 years ago, maybe closer to 49, 57% now, but just really interacting with folks and just giving folks hope. I jokingly say, like, hey, they still employ humans here for a reason.
right. Yeah. Now, and that's so, I mean, so many things have gone by the way of technology, right? Some sort of advancement, some sort of invention, some sort of robot, whatever. Um, but yeah, it's good to hear that the librarian hasn't completely been replaced by the PC or the, whatever, the computer or whatever. I don't even know how they would do that if you actually were trying to. I guess you could just scan. I don't know. But it's good to know that there is someone there to empower, right? Again, advancing others. There it is again. I just, yeah, I love that. And so then how how have you seen the Lord work? Um, is that is going north the name, right, of the book and the podcast? Does north, does that symbolize or signify God, or is that just upward mobility, or is that just improvement? What is the and am I even allowed to ask what the symbolism is behind going north?
Hey, you actually listed all of the things that are part of the symbolism because, hey, advancing is all about going up, that upward mobility, helping others to really advance and embrace their dreams. And really, through God, He'll give you a big dream, a big vision that sometimes you may be like, man, am I even capable of that? You may even feel like Moses at the burning bush. It's like, like, is this weed coming out the tree? Like, is this for real? Like, wait a second. So, yeah, it's really all about going up in life and really just having that faith. And faith is really confidence in the unseen. And the thing is, that confidence in the unseen can lead you into places where you can be a champion seen amongst the millions, the multitude. And it's all because you just take step that step forward. And
Mm,
sometimes there will be some fear involved, like heck, even earlier with the book itself. I thought that was something I was going to do in my late 30s, early 40s, but it was a blessing that happened in my early 20s. And
mm,
sometimes, like, whatever God has for you, He has for you. And delays aren't denials. Like, there have been
mm,
goals in the past that were delayed. And looking back, where it was like, wow, it was a good thing that that delay happened. Like, being with the Maxwell Leadership Team, that was something I was going to do in 2017. But sadly, I lost my father back then.
oh,
And that
sorry.
year, with dealing with all that grief and everything. And in 2019, where I was able to become a member with a cheaper deal and had actually better friendships too, who were already in the team, was better prepared for what to expect and even stronger as an individual. Because the thing is, like, sometimes we may want to have something, we want to acquire something, but God gives you those delays and be like, hey, it's not your time yet, buddy. I know you want your stuff now. I know we're in the air fryer microwave generation where you scroll and it's right there. Like, nah, you got to go back into the oven sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, and that's something I think with reading that is, it's very apparent. It's like, even if you're listening to an audible, you can only listen to it. I think maybe the settings go up to like 2.5 times, but
Yeah.
and I'm a weirdo, and I'll often listen at 2 times, but most people it's like 2 times is crazy. 1.5, like there we are, whatever. But you can only listen so fast. You can only read so fast. It's forcing you to actually slow down, take in a story, right? Take in information and then sort that information and then interpret that information and then be able to apply how it is that you've interpreted it for your life and the way that you're going. Whereas, yeah, you're not opening a book or pressing play on an audio book and then scrolling super fast to try to find the bottom of Instagram. It's like, no, you got to go at the pace of the story that you can understand. Otherwise, it's just like, data like bouncing off your face. It's not actually entering into your brain space. That is, I don't know, something beautiful about that. I love that you said, we are in the air fryer, microwave. And so some tips on writing, and this is more selfish as we come towards the end, but I know that there's some listeners that are listening right now that I've had conversations with that are writing, right, to write a book, or they're writing in hopes that maybe a book will form, whatever. Um, what what are some what are some of the ways in which you either find your happy place or just write consistently, or how does the the Going North happened at 23, but now you got a couple of other chapters under your belt and another book that's about to be released in Q1, right? Sometime it'll probably be released or just about to be released right when this uh, podcast publishes. So, because that'll be like the beginning of March. So around there, just after that, right? What are some tips? What are some tricks? What are some skills? What are some things that you have done that have helped you in your journey of being an author and writing?
Sure thing. First thing is find your POP, your place of productivity. And for me, that was coffee shops, like
Mm,
the Starbucks, the Dunkin' Donuts, local coffee shops, like getting some caffeine and having an outline ready. That would probably be
mm,
the tip number two is first find your place of productivity where you do your best work. Heck, even sometimes that may be getting up earlier than your family. I know with you being a dad, you probably do that by default anyway.
yep.
And
Yes, I
sometimes
do.
staying yeah, man, just staying up later too, like late in the night, like a
Mhm,
couple writers, they sometimes stay up like 10 to 1 a.m., 2 a.m.
mhm,
doing their writing, doing their work because hey, that's usually when the kids are to bed and
mhm,
and if it's a two-parent household, mommy's tired too, so hey, she'll catch her Z's and she might enjoy whatever she enjoys, sleep time without the hubby at the moment. So really having that place of productivity, definitely creating an outline that will make your life go a lot easier and a lot quicker because the
mhm,
thing was, and when I first wrote my book, and that night that I said I was going to have my book done in a year, I ran home after the meeting was over and wrote 14 pages of raw content that became the last chapter of the first book. And I
mhm,
really had no direction after that until I had a coach actually help me to construct an outline. And the thing is, I was able to adjust along the way. And the title came after I got about a good 60% in when I realized, oh, wow, I'm actually making some good progress here. So find your place of productivity, have an outline, make sure you create that outline because that'll make your writing a lot easier because you get the plot in paragraphs under each topic.
mm,
And
mhm,
then the next thing would be, heck, if you can afford it, have a writing coach because that helped me to put myself over the edge for the first book. And the next one is be open to evolving because sometimes what works the first time isn't going to work the next time. Because one thing about the first book, a deadline puts a dead end on procrastination. That was
mm,
true for my first book. Second book, not so true because I said, oh, yeah, 2018 is going to be done. But was going through some grief with my father who passed away and just having these bouts of imposter syndrome after interviewing a few authors who had way bigger following more followings than me and all these different books and doing all these different things and was saying like wow am I really the person to write this and just getting over that and realizing hey sometimes your message, or should I say the message that you've been given, needs to come from you because even though folks out there may have a similar message, they may not resonate with them. Heck, even Christ himself, I believe it was in John, where he told his disciples that they will do greater works than him. And
mm,
Peter brought a lot of souls to Christ, to the Holy
mhm,
Spirit,
mhm.
after he ascended. So, and it's so true when you think about it, because we have so many tools. Like, just imagine if Christ had a podcast today, Christ was on Instagram today, like with all the social medias, dude, the the TikTok would be healing talk.
Oh. Yeah, and
Yeah, man.
that is it. I mean, shoot, that opens up a whole other thought line for me. But first of all, thank you so much for sharing. That's I think incredibly helpful, very very doable, very practical. And then to clarify, um, right? You said place of productivity, have an outline, writing coach. I'll just pause there. You said open to evolving, and then obviously we were talking about a little bit of, or you were talking about a little bit of what that involves. But so with a coach, is there? I'm sure that costs are from I don't know a little bit to a whole heck of a lot. But what would be like a cost that you're looking for in terms of coach where you're not gonna you're not going to just get somebody on Instagram that's never actually written a book and is just trying to get money from you and then tell you. Is there a particular number to hit, or do you have a particular direction to go? Like how do you kind of scrub who your coach is? If somebody's like, yeah, I think I can afford a coach, where would somebody go? How would somebody think about that in terms of cost? Or do they
I
just
would
go to dombrightmon.com? Is that?
I mean, hey, if they want to bring me on, that's cool. And if they don't, that's cool too. But I have to say, definitely check out their body of work. And if it comes through a referral, then that's even better, especially with coaches nowadays, because one guy on Facebook joked that, hey, 2020 through 2022, or should I say 2020 through 20 early 2022, was basically coaches selling coaching programs to coaches who want to coach coaches.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be
Yeah.
in that area. So
Yeah.
I'd say if you can have a referral, and if you don't have anyone to referral anyone to you, I'd say check out their body of work. I'd say like Michelle Chenoweth, she does book coaching. She even has I believe, a 3-month program. She's actually taught as an adjunct professor out in I believe, somewhere in Maryland, Delaware area, somewhere in the
Mhm.
DMV, or
Mhm.
Delmarva, as some call it.
Mhm.
Your book done right, she's good on that. She's actually helped folks get to the finish line with their books. Like, she's definitely someone I'd recommend for folks. Heck, even Nina Amir, she might be another good one. I have no personal contact with her, but I'm a fan of her work because she has a book out there that helps authors, I should say, help bloggers to blog their way into a book. Heck, even a lady out in the UK, Emma Desi, she's also a good person, though. She helps out folks. And another person I'd recommend would be Holly Wharton. She actually is in the UK as well, but she actually originally lived in California, but traveled to South America, had a little resort there, then moved out to the UK, and now she's married to a guy who's bilingual. So she publishes books both in English and in Spanish.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
she's done great work as well. I'd say definitely it's really discernment
Mhm.
and a thing of like making sure they have a good track record and a body of work.
Yep.
And price tag, it really depends on what you're looking to afford. If the person asks you, hey, how much you make a year? What's your yearly salary? Like, you might want to make a run for it on that one. If they ask you some type of question like that, definitely make a run for it.
Yeah. They're calculating how much they're going to make, right, off of you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's all that I think is really sound, solid advice. And so, first of all, I just want to say, Dom, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. And this show obviously is leaders of leaders, and we believe Jesus Christ was the leader of leaders. And yeah, there wasn't TikTok, there wasn't Instagram, and I don't think that was by mistake. I think with God's foresight, I think He knew this is the place and this is the time, obviously, that we're going to create this influence. And you want to talk about influence, and like you said, greater works than even Jesus Christ did, right? Came after him, and it just grew like a, yeast permeates through the entire lump, right, of dough, or like a small mustard seed grows, right? These are all understanding ways that we can understand the kingdom of God now as it pervades through the entirety of our world. um, and and it has, like, there's no, you can't look back in history and not see that incredible hinge point, BC to AD, or even CE to BCE, and all, however you want to, there's the hinge point is right there, which is incredible. Now bringing that to more local, more personal, more to Dom, obviously you have spheres of influence through your work, through your body of work, right? Your podcast and your books and things like that. Um, Obviously, you're not just looking to gain followers, you're looking to, like you said, advance others, right? Grow them into their unfulfilled potential of what they can be, truly being the best version of themselves, which is why it was a no-brainer to be like, dude, I want to have you on the show. This is going to be awesome. Uh, what do you have a particular piece of advice to kind of finish this out with for anybody who's looking to sharpen that sword of leadership, leaders being a leader that actually forms and helps advance others to be leaders?
Wow, that's kind of a kind of a good open-ended question because it's like, wow, because I had one thought and it's like, wow, this sounds even better. It's like, darn, which one do I
Well, you've given so much advice the entire time, and so obviously you can choose from any of the things that you've already even shared, and that would be, I think, very palpable, very very principled, and highly valued. But yeah, if there was anything different or anything that even just like, hey, think about this as you're going out there with your spheres of influence in front of you, because every listener has a sphere of influence. Every human, right, has a sphere of influence. Yeah, I don't know if there's uh, anything that we can leave the show with, drop the mic with, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's a quote by Jim Rohn. He passed away sadly in 2009, but he had so many quotable quotes. Like if anybody hasn't read any of his books or listened to any of his talks, like definitely add him to your repertoire. He was a Christian himself too. He was
Mhm.
actually Tony Robbins' mentor. Like the whole Ip Man to Bruce Lee, like Jim Rohn to Tony Robbins. Like he was basically Tony Robbins Ip Man.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when you
Yep.
hear him, you understand why. And one of my favorite quotes from him, which is probably applicable, especially for men nowadays, is that I will take care of me for you, and you take care of you for me. Take care of yourself. Like, make sure you keep
Mm.
yourself in mind in terms of self care. And that just doesn't have to be the whole manny petty thing. Like, I ain't talking about getting a manicure and then put some 3-foot nails on your hands. Don't do that. Don't go full Dracula. Don't do that. I'm just talking about like just getting sleep, getting that exercise, no matter how small of amount it is, drinking more water. Like, that's actually water's good in so many multiple ways, especially as you age because it keeps your body more fluid, especially your brain. Because one thing
Mm.
that actually held my father back in his final years that he was dehydrated at times in one of his ER visits was because he was dehydrated. We gave him
Mm.
water, but he wouldn't drink it. But give him juice or the Pepsi Cola, oh yeah, he'll drink those. So take care of yourself no matter what that is. So that way those around you will be better for it. Because if you take care of yourself, you'll be able to better
So
take
good.
care of your people.
Yeah, so good. So good. Dom, so good. Thank you so much. Honored again to have you on the Leaders of Leaders podcast. Thanks.
Woohoo! You the man, Aaron. I'm honored for the opportunity, baby.